Dr. Anil Kakodkar needs no introduction. So he's a legend in the S&T domain. But very few of us might have actually met him. Today we have a unique opportunity of hearing him address our gathering. Dr. Kakodkar is a nuclear physicist and mechanical engineer. He was Director BRC for many years, Chairman Atomic Energy Commission, and Secretary to the Government of India. He's played a major role in India's nuclear tests. A very, very significant role in India's quest for nuclear power. So I understand that for quite some time to come, the supply of uranium to run the nuclear reactors is assured. So you may recall all the discussions that happened at the government level with international bodies to ensure that our energy security is intact. Dr. Kakodkar played a very, very vital role in those discussions. To such an extent that today nuclear is no longer in the news. So, Dr. Kakodkar believes India should be self-reliant in general, specifically in energy, and in the nuclear context, he believes in the use of thorium resources that are indigenously available. All that development using thorium as a fuel in the nuclear reactor requires a lot of technology development. He is deeply involved in it. Of course, it is not just the reactor system, but in the nuclear context, the word safe technology keeps going with it. So nuclear safety and nuclear technology is involved with both aspects. So not recently, I think in 2009, he was awarded Padma Vibhushan. So really, really honored to have Dr. Kakodkar amongst our midst.
Good morning, and thank you, IIT Kanpur, Professor Karamikar, Professor Muralidhar, and indeed all the participants for having me here. I think this is indeed a very important program, because India is a large country, large number of people, large number of intellectuals. I don't think we have large number of leaders. Well, leaders are there, but you know what kind of leaders are we. We don't have many of them. So this is indeed a very important program. I have been asked to talk about technical education. I'm not going to talk about what normally you would expect out of a talk on technical education, but rather to speak about focus areas, the objectives that we must realize out of technical education. And I thought that probably would be relevant in the context of this particular program. So, the first point that I think we need to recognize is the fact that technology is much more than what it can contribute to economy, certainly technology. In all countries which are big, powerful, of course, countries which have resources, countries which have riches, they obviously are, they derive some strength. But the real strength, if you look at the power structure in the world around, is actually technology. If you want to compare, you can compare Saudi Arabia and any other country. Equation in terms of riches may be of one kind, but equation in terms of real power is clearly dictated by technology. In fact, technology is the key to comprehensive national power. So it's not just the military capability, but capability of all sorts. Technology empowers citizens, societies, nations. But also recognize that technology is double-edged. So technology can do many good things, technology can also do many bad things. And so in the context of education institution, particularly technology education institution, I think the emphasis on holistic human resource building is clearly very important. You make them very competent in technology and not worry about grooming of their mindsets. You can actually create a lot of damage. So that's another factor that we need to keep in mind. For nations particularly, but also for organizations, it contributes a lot to your strategic autonomy. If you are a poor buyer, then you can get tricked into technology which gives you great short-term dividends. But if you don't have an overall comprehension of the way current technologies are and way they are likely to evolve in the future, you may actually go on a wrong track. And then you may realize that after a while, then either you have to continue that because you have invested so much, and then of course to that extent you have a little handicap compared to others, or you have to do a mid-course change, and which means a significant reinvestment. And so I think insights in technology is an important part of ensuring strategic autonomy. And this is true for organizations, but this is even true in a much bigger measure for countries. And I think it's a part of the capacity building of the population and the society as a whole. So, stating the obvious, technology is important. Now, we classically talk, we are in knowledge era now. We are migrating from industrial era to knowledge era. Before that, we were in agrarian era. If you look back in history, industrial era started somewhere around the year 1700. And till that time, India was actually a country with highest GDP in the world. And after that, the relative GDP of the country started declining. And by the time we became independent, it had actually hit the rock bottom. Now it is slowly going up. And of course, our economy is growing. There are many factors to this. For example, we were kind of an oppressed society. Foreign rule has made significant contribution. Our education system was altered with very different kinds of objectives. But all in all, if you sort of go deep into this issue, it's the technology. It's not as if we didn't have technologies around that time. In fact, we're quite advanced in certain technologies. I think those who have gone through the history, technology history of the country, they know that too well. But the fact is that we started becoming more and more insignificant in economic terms. Of course, we were insignificant in political terms. And now that we have independence, things are taking shape. But we are also making a transition from industrial era to knowledge era. And I think that's a huge, big opportunity for us. Why do I say that? Agrarian era was essentially, you have large fields, you have people living around there in small clusters. So I think rural habitat and agrarian era is something that went together. And likewise, the industrial era and urban habitat. You have large factories, a large number of people, they have, of course, urban habitat had many other drivers also, but I think you can say that they somewhat go together. You also know that there is a huge disparity between urban domain and rural domain, and that disparity perhaps is growing. And according to me, it's a matter of serious concern. Knowledge era, actually, knowledge technologies, they are actually champions. They encourage decentralization and democratization. So what could have happened in an urban domain, in an industrial environment, today can happen in a distributed manner. So it can also happen in the rural domain. So I think this specific preference for an urban habitat or a rural habitat, in my view, that difference is going to be diluted going forward. And if we do well about our human resource development strategies, and we have the huge demographic dividend, huge youth resource, I think it's a huge opportunity for a country like India to transform very rapidly. If only we empower both youth in urban areas as well as rural areas in a manner that we utilize this power of decentralization and democratization and bridge this disparity. Now, I think there is, I don't see enough attention to this aspect of this opportunity, but I thought, especially mentioning this in front of the community, that all of you represents. I think only you can do this. Governments by themselves are unlikely to be able to do that. And just to clarify that, I think it's obvious, but there are opportunities apart from the traditional agriculture, allied activities, value addition to agriculture. This we keep talking about. But today you can talk about knowledge-based industrial activities in villages. Additive manufacture, 3D printing, it can happen anywhere. Artificial intelligence can play a huge impact everywhere. And of course, the service sector, which happens to be a huge contributor to the economy, that can see contribution from youth both in urban areas as well as rural areas. And I think there is this huge transformative potential provided we recognize this and put our act together. So technology is important, and that's the main thing. Now let's look at how we have done about technology or science and technology. So let's first talk about science. And last several years, we know that the science, technology, innovation indicators from the Indian environment have seen spectacular progress. And now there are several areas where we are, well, not globally based, but close to that. For example, India is among the top 5 countries, in fact, at 3rd position in the world in terms of scientific publications in nanoscience and technology. And there are many other indicators like that. I don't know. The obvious in DST document annually we get this information. The point I wish to make is similar was the case when there was microelectronics revolution. Similar was the case when the high temperature superconductivity came to fore. India was close to the top of the table as far as scientific publications are concerned. But when it came to technology, converting that into economic good, the whole thing was lost somewhere. I hope it doesn't happen in the context of nanoscience. And that is actually the central theme of what I'm doing. So there is, and it's not as if we have not done well in the context of technology. And here are some examples. And, now, we have, this country has done something great in many areas on its own, in technology. Of course, the space, defense, atomic energy is something we all know, but for example, even in petroleum sector, the Paradip refinery, the new big refinery, I think they have done something spectacular arising out of technology built domestically. And they, all of you may not be directly familiar with this, but I'm familiar with this. I think they, from lab experiments to a very small pilot, and from there, straight away it was taken to a 15 million metric tons per annum refinery. And it's actually creating huge dividends. You can transform a much larger share of the crude into the light fractions, much larger. So obviously you get much higher value addition. And the like, Tejas is a very well-known story, Green Revolution, White Revolution is a known story. The short point I'm making is that we have done well in some areas of technology. We have done well in many areas of science. But if you ask a question, how many of these technologies are of the kind where we say that we are doing it first time ever, ahead of anybody in the world? Or you have a new scientific discovery and we quickly translate into technology which makes impact, which is disruptive. And you will find there are not many examples. In the beginning when I said that, technology is at the base of countries which have become very powerful. When we say that, we actually mean these countries, they are very quick in translating scientific discovery into technology, sometimes ahead of many others. Why US is such a powerful country is precisely because of this. And that is something missing in our world. We've done well on both sides, but we are not able to make connections between scientific research and I'm talking about newly evolved scientific research. There are things happening now. Today's situation is much better than what it was earlier. But I think we need to recognize that we have miles to go. Now, another manifestation of that is, you can see this in this figure. This figure is from the R&D magazine of Better. There are many other organizations who also put out this data, and this data is put out periodically, some on an annual basis, some on a biannual basis. Now, this is a rather busy slide, but what it says, it actually says that we spend more money on research and development compared to several countries whom we recognize, whom we know are technologically very powerful countries. Israel, Canada, Sweden, UK, Switzerland, Finland. So normally we compare with United States, China. They spend much larger money. Now it's good to compete with them. We should. But here are countries who actually spend much less money than us. And just compare the balance of trade between these countries and India in terms of technology products. The question is, if we spend more money compared to these countries, then why balance of trade in technology products is not in our world? And that's a question that I think all of us in the SIT domain and also particularly in academic domain, we must address, we must answer. And that is the key challenge before technical education in my mind. So when I looked at this data, the thought comes to mind that, well, India is a big country, so maybe our resources are getting spread too. And then so we are not able to produce results. Not true. Because the fact also is that as a percentage of our population, the number of people working in R&D is actually small. In absolute number it may be significant, but in relation to our population, and that's how on the y-axis India is way below. India is there. So very low percentage, both in terms of percentage of full-time equivalents as percentage of population, we are low. And of course, the money we spend as a percentage of our GDP, which of course is a very commonly talked about subject, is also very low. And I think there is a need to increase both. Certainly, we don't want to see India lying here, we want to see India lying there. For example, Finland is there, Israel is here. So they spend much little money, much smaller money than us, but see where they allocate themselves. Now, but even after recognizing that, if you look at the total budget that country spends on R&D and divide by the total number of full-time equivalents, you will get a number, it's written at 2.7 million per full-time equivalent. And that number is comparable with the best in the world. So it's not as if money spent on each one of us is anything. It may not be rightly spent. How much money goes in lab, how much money goes in salaries and other brick and mortar is another issue. And that's what we need to look at. But I think we're spending enough money both on per capita term and also in absolute term. And so, as I said in the beginning, we have to ask that question. The third point is a good part of that expenditure is in fact public money. And you don't, countries which have done well, it's a very very interesting and very useful combination of public expenditure and private expenditure. In this context, I would say industry expenditure. People, organizations that are involved in industrial activities, as compared to public expenditure in S&P as such, that proportion is quite distorted in India. Again, I think the industry expenditure is growing, but again, we have miles to go. And that's a signature of inadequate mutual trust, inadequate mutual confidence, inadequate mutual respect. And so at times I say, politically they say confidence building measures. I think we need to devise a lot of confidence building measures between the people working in R&D and people working in industry. So there is an urgent need to evolve and nurture conducive innovation ecosystem and respond to technology development demands. Now, incubator is an important activity for all of you, and that certainly has to grow much bigger than what it is. But please recognize that in addition to that, it is also a cultural problem. It requires mindset change. When you engage with people with very diverse kind of portfolios, unless you are able to talk each other's language, understand each other's language, there is bound to be a problem. So it needs a mindset change across all domains, and that includes society, academia, industry, bureaucracy, political establishment, policymakers, and so on. So I have, after decades of working in S&T domain, I have come to this conclusion that challenge before our S&T domain, of course it is technology challenge, science challenge, but the bigger part of that challenge is a cultural challenge. I think we need to readjust, reorient ourselves to make that difference. Otherwise, why the efficiency of conversion of resources into what the country wants, what our objective is, what we always state, S&T is the basis of development and all. Why we are so weak and so deficient. And I think that is the purpose of technical education. So I will, this is a picture from an old paper, 1997, Pasture Squad. I'm sure many of you would have seen this. The problem in our country, and I'm not talking about elite institutions from where all of you come, I'm talking about country. The technical education domain of this country is very big. The problem in the domain as a whole is most of our research actually lies in that quadrant where there is a big cross and a caption. Research that goes nowhere, or science to nowhere. It's actually waste of money. We may file documents saying, yes, I have complied requirement of doing a PhD because that will give me promotion. I have complied requirement of having so many papers. And then, you have all these guidelines coming from various places and you apply that guideline. So we do all that. According to me, it actually means nothing. Unless your research is moved away from here and is parked in one of the other three domains, and preferably in Pasteur's quadrant. Because Pasteur's quadrant is where you maximize pushing the knowledge frontiers, contribution to new knowledge, and also contribution to the wealth of the society, economy of the society. Pushing knowledge frontiers is important. Science for science sake is important. Similarly, the empirical work, which is called the Edison's quadrant. I develop technologies. Don't ask me how I did it, but I did it with brute force. I think it's important. But more important than both of them is to be in that Pasteur's quadrant. I think while deciding our priorities, when deciding the problems that we take, there must be a constant debate to say, and this should guide our value system. I told you that we have these yardsticks. You must have done PhD, you must have so many papers and all. Now, even if that yardstick is implemented in the true spirit, you insist on quality of publications, you insist on, but then if it goes one-sided, then you are unlikely to contribute to technology. And if you emphasize on technology, saying that you tell me some functioning or working technology, and not emphasize on knowledge contribution, again it will be nonsense. And you cannot really do both. So unless you do the two together, I think you cannot become strong. And that is, according to me, again another objective of technical education. And so this actually requires correction of value system. And I will come to that in a bit. Now, so far we talked about our own system, what the situation is. But recognizing all that, there is some further thing that we need to look at. And to understand that, here is some data which is from a document which was prepared by a think tank in US when they were looking at the visa policy following articulations of President Trump. What they did was to look at the country of origin of immigrant founders of billion-dollar startup companies in US. And their conclusion was India contributed maximum number of entrepreneurs who have created billion-dollar startups. So whatever is the situation with the Indian S&T system, Indian academic system, these are people who have come out of that system. The question is, if they can do that in United States, why not in India? This is actually a question beyond the domain of academics. but it's also an important question. If you want to be, as a country, you want to be technologically strong, you must. And that answer, according to me, lies in the ecosystem, in that cultural attribute which I was referring to. And unless that cultural correction is made, I think it will be very tough. So I think we have several dimensions that one can figure out on the basis of data which is staring us in our face as to what we should do. So to figure out what is the difference, I just have picked up this transparency from the University of Tokyo. According to them, the description of university is where there is individual research, which actually contributes to the original achievement, knowledge creation, and so on. But equally important is the group research, group R&D. And on the right-hand side, you see there is a bar, education sharing between industry and university. And this is not a step. Even when you are talking about individual research, there is industry participation. And even when we are talking about group research, there is in fact higher industry participation. The way you define your problems, the attributes, the skills and knowledge sets that go in, they are different in both. And in a university or an academic environment, we are supposed to be incorporating both. And that is where I think there is difference, by and large. Again, I think the group sitting here is top of the table as far as India is concerned. So it doesn't represent the true mix. But the technical education system in the country must incorporate a very large, I would say 50-50 effort on group research. And group research, see, we have this great buzzword, multidisciplinary research. Now that is quite different than group research, according to me, is actually focused towards addressing a specific problem. Could be from society, could be from industry. And no problem belongs to a particular discipline. Problem requires a multiple set of disciplines to be brought together, and that's what leads to multidisciplinaries. And that, I think, is a major change in our academic environment that we must bring in. So the key, according to me, is to create outcome orientation to R&D investments. Coming back to the first question. While we do a lot in terms of inquiry-based research, I think we must also create this demand connotation, demand-driven research by industry, laboratory consortia, multiple institutions working together. The share of work or the complexion of that work varying depending on the technology readiness levels at different stages. And this, I think, has to be well knit. And that's an important part. So the motivation for industry R&D lab partnership, I think, should go beyond the tax benefits. So today, tax benefits are a big factor. There are some companies, of course, because it's sitting here. So they are exception. I mean, just like you are exception, they are exception. They really drive demand-driven research. But by and large, you see so many institutions, there will be a label, research. Hospitals particularly is very common. Hospital and research center. because they get taxed. How much research we do for us. So that should change. That partnership should really be purpose oriented. And then of course there are issues about market access and highly that I think that is belongs to some other domain. So the question is, of course, one is demand-driven research industry may put forward a need, and then we all work together, break our heads along with industry to see how we address that. There are many other ways you can begin this orientation. Quite apart from looking at the world of science literature, research literature, where we know which are the directions we are going, which is important. But that aspect addresses one aspect of what are the new knowledge needs. That doesn't necessarily completely answer what our country's needs. So one industry engagement could tell us. Other, you simply look at your import-export top of the list items. Normally, I would have expected that areas where I am strong, I would dominate exports, and areas where I am weak, that area will dominate imports. I actually did this purely internet search, got this list, and I find most of the items are actually common. Iron and steel. I thought we have great heritage in steel industry. Our resource position in terms of quality at least is extremely good, or was extremely good. But we are a major exporter, major importer, with import being much higher than export. The question is why? Should that not become a thrust area for research? See, in this list, leave aside hydrocarbon. Even there you can ask the question, why we are so much 80% dependent on oil coming from abroad? And saying that we have been able to discover so much of oil on Indian soil is according to me not enough. Of course, we should do something better in exploration because it is probably not fully done. But hydrocarbon is hydrocarbon. It's a molecule consisting of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. It provides energy. There is plenty of coal. There is plenty of biomass. There is a huge gas hydrate potential. And each one of them, the total biomass that this country has, sorry, you will repeat that, total surplus agricultural residue that this country has, it's actually more than enough to produce entire gasoline that this country requires. With the 2G technology that has come within our reach. So the question is, why are we still importing so much of it, right? Which actually is threatening our economy going forward. Should that not be the thrust of research and development? Should that not be the thrust of academic inquiry? So like that we can, several things. So there are only 3 areas of strength in this list. You can look at it differently and you will find many other areas of strength, but in this list. These are automobiles, these are garments and pharmaceuticals. And that has happened because Indian R&D has made a lot of difference. But you would notice most of that R&D has taken place in industry. There is some in academics, but a larger part has happened in industry. And on one side we say we don't have enough industry institute linkages at this level. On the other side, This is what has happened. So it's not as if industry does not recognize the merit or benefit of it. It is just that ecosystem which is so necessary is impacted. You must have heard about this technology vision 2035. It's a document created by IPAC, which is in public domain for the last 3.5 years. There we actually looked at, IPAC earlier under leadership of Dr. Kalam, there was an earlier document, Technology Vision 2020. And because of that, several good things have happened in the country. We thought that, well, we must revisit because we are close to 2020 and we should put a vision for a longer period in place. That was the motivation for. But this time, we said we'll keep people in focus, not technology. We look at technology, what might happen, it may happen for a variety of reasons. Many of them may be external. And nothing wrong with that, but the question is, it's important to understand the needs of our people. So visualize what kind of Indian population would be in 2030, what kind of needs they might have. And they're all written there in the, in fact, some 12 prerogatives have been identified, some at individual level, some at collective level. And then what are all the technologies that could be brought to bear in meeting those prerogatives? And they're all listed. And how many of them are readily available, how many of them we need to do some more work, how many of them are in imagination. All that is there. So I think now you have a document which has been prepared by a collective of something like 5,000 people. It's not done by a small committee or something. It's a hugely participative exercise, and including all segments of society. It's not just technical people, it's not just the highly educated people, nothing. It's all right, no, it has seen inputs from very large number of people. So it's a kind of people's document. I think I would encourage all of you to take a look at this, and you will find many pointers as to new areas that we should. So the short point I am making is that we can bring in a lot of such objectives to bear on how we choose our problem, such problem, and how we connect that with the contribution to national development. Now, that document it has looked at technologies across a wide variety of sectors. One of that is in fact education, because education is a huge challenge of our country, simply because of on one side there is a quality issue, and on the other side there is a access issue. To deal with large numbers, and you want to handle both of them together, I think you have to take recourse to technology. There is no escape. And so it also looks at what kind of technology scene would be there in 2035. And so it's like education to empower people to create technologies, but also use technology to create good education for people to empower both ways. Now let me come to that aspect of value system. See, technology can evolve in an incremental way, which is normally that's what will happen. So if I have a technology lab, we have several labs dedicated to railways, dedicated to automotives, petroleum. Now, they are custodians of the technology as it exists today. And they're constantly researching on that, improving that technology. Now, and most of the robust technologies which have come around, automobile has been here for such a long time. Today's automobile is far, far superior compared to what it was decades earlier. But it is essentially still the same automobile. We now hear people talking about flying cars. Obviously, many new things are there is an element of disruption. But people are talking, those who are near smartphone, you can occasionally get some clips on flying car. People have started doing. Or again, sticking to star transportation, you have this high-speed train, bullet trains. You also have magnets. Now a lab which is dedicated to automobiles which have to run on roads, or a train which has to run on wheels, running on rails. That's one track, very important track. You cannot ignore it. But unlikely that such lab will create a flying car, or unlikely that such a lab dedicated to railways will create a maglev. On the other hand, imagine a completely different lab which is in fundamental research. So let's say a lab dedicated to physics, or more specifically to electromagnetics. And more likely that the seeds of concept of such disruptive technologies would be sown there. Now the question is, if you say, no, but our lab is purely fundamental research lab, we don't do anything applied, you are actually saying that you are going to deny yourself with disruptive technologies. And that's a cultural barrier we suffer from in India. It's not so in many other countries. We actually suffer. And we need to change that. I'm sure you must be having such cultural barriers between departments of your own institutions. You have departments dedicated to physics, chemistry, biology, and you have departments dedicated to engineering. And you examine and you will find such barriers exist. And I think that means that you are denying yourself the possibility of a disruptive technology coming out of your own institution. Now, how do you make that happen? You can make that happen by changing the value system. So please focus on this box in between. Because we all do evaluation of faculty, evaluation of scientists in lab and all. And we have some yardsticks. Please look at it whether those parameters would allow you to realize the objectives that you think you should be achieved. Or every time you get some new suggestions at the national level, we want this, we want that. And just look at the value system that we're pursuing it. Because the individuals in the system, I will perform according to the yardsticks of measurement of my contribution, my performance. So if my performance is to be measured in terms of contribution to fundamentals, I will actually focus on that. Maybe I'm interested in that, so I continue to do that. But if my yardstick says that, all right, but if there is some contribution in terms of translation, which has also made some impact, and there should be some way of measuring that impact, again through proper peer process. Then I would say that, well, let me see if I can do it myself. I may find that, well, psychologically, my aptitude is to do only fundamental work. then I will find some partner and I will team up and say that this is an idea, I have come this far, I think I should team up with you, you can take it forward, so let's become a team. That is multidisciplinary. And I think we need to encourage that. Again, it's happening, it's happening. I think. Since all of you come from IITs and IITs, you must have seen that happening, and you must have seen that happening. You compare the situation which was maybe 30, 40 years ago in your own institution, and it is now wherever this is happening, and what big impact it makes. And I think we need to nurture that further. So to me, the aspects for measuring excellence should depend on, number one, impact on peers in the core area. If I belong to a particular discipline, what impact I have made in my own area, on the peers in my area. I should also look at impact on downstream partners. If I am doing any work which is applied, and if I have no downstream partner, then that applied work has no meaning. So there must be a way of measuring the impact on a downstream. There must be first of all a downstream partner. What's the impact on those downstream partners? And then impact on the end users, could be industry, could be society. And so just like we have measures for impact on peers in your own area, these are well established measures. I think we need to also create these other measures. And the measure performance of excellence should be a proper weighted combination of these. And unless we create such measurements, which I think they are present only by exception, by and large they are not existing. But unless we create, you would not see flourishing multidisciplinary activity in true sense. So I think if you want to create that cultural change, I think we must move in that direction. I think I'll quickly stop, but let me just make a point. And to illustrate that point, I put together put TIFR and BRC side by side. According to me, both of them are great institutions. Both of them were created, founded by Dr. Baba, same visionary. Both of them are located in Mumbai, but they are structured completely differently. So you can ask yourself a question, why the same individual did it differently? And it took me 3-4 years of contemplation to figure it out. But I think there was a deep thought in it. We want to promote multidisciplinary research. You must have complementary institutions network together. So, I told you about individuals, but when you are doing largish programs, you are talking about groups of individuals. So you are actually nurturing two groups differently because they are different. You can't handle, for example, in a community we also have Tata Memorial Center, which works on cancer. Yet another completely different ecosystem. But they all work together in some manner. And I think that is very important. Now I noticed that even in that, it started with some objective, but slowly they drifted apart. Mark said, no, we'll do big projects. So they started saying. So there is basic research going on in Bar. With due apologies to my own colleagues, none of them are present here. But I'll say Bharat is not that strong in basic research. Right? TIFR is a place where first computer of the country began. TIFR is the place where this source of microwave and radar technology and so on. Samir came out of TIFR. So, if you ask me, which is the fountainhead of technologies in this country, real technologies, it is TIFR. TIFR is not like that today. It's very strong in fundamental research. It's not like that. So for me, it has been a painful thing that we have drifted away from a very well thought out setup. So to reunite that, not back in TIFR, but to reunite this ethos of fundamental research and translation to technology, we have created this Homi Bhabha National Institute. Because it runs like any other university, research university. But one of the key emphasis there is to work on the interface of new research and technology based on that new research. And when we did that, we found if you want to ask somebody to work in that area, you don't get one person to guide such a page. Because I'll tell you an example. So General Sundaram, many of you might have heard about him, person who did 2-3 Dr. Kalam. He once came to me and said the old story and said, look, these quantum wells and microdots and quantum dots, this was the date when they were still in the research domain, and this will revolutionize technology. And he said, your own TIFR has huge strength in terms of research in this area. And in BARC you require technologies, and he just took one example, and that is the temperature measurement using infrared sensors. So he says currently we are measuring, we are getting accuracies in 1 degree Celsius or thereabouts. You make these instruments on these quantum dots, you will get at least an order of magnitude improvement in the least count, sensitivity. And I tried to put a team together to work on that, didn't succeed. And today market is, why today? 10 years back the market was just flooded with infrared parameters. They are well within our reach. I can tell you hundreds of such examples where we find that we have the capability in the country, we say we can do this. I'm sure all the theses they write, first introductory para is, how important it is and all. But in reality, nothing happens. That is the culture of problem. So, of course, I must tell, I'm very proud of atomic energy. I'm very proud of what I myself done. But when I ask this question, how much of that technology is first time ever, I can't answer that question. And that is what we must. I think I'll skip that and come to the end for discussion. This is now more philosophical, nothing to do with technical education, but it has something to do with how we groom our people. See, knowledge, society and economy, imagine these 3 domains. Now all of us have to earn something for living. So the society and economy, they always go together. I may be doing agriculture, I may be doing trading, I may be working somewhere. Now in all of them, see, traditionally, the knowledge domain is, for the timing, imagine that the knowledge domain is not sufficiently interacting with the society or economy. The knowledge domain It's all for high priests to sit down somewhere and do some shastra and things like that. But society and economy will interact. What do you get? You get a society with transactional mindset. Crudely put, society with traders' mindset. Now, imagine, and particularly in the knowledge era, that's even more important. Imagine that the knowledge domain is also very thick, highly interactive with both society as well as economy. Then people will start thinking, can I do this, can I do that? That's where innovation will flourish. That's where entrepreneurship will flourish. So that mindset, transactions or transactional activities will always remain. They're always there to stay. But the mindset will go beyond that in terms of value creation. It could be again in variety of activities. It will go much beyond just plain simple transactional things. And that's what we want. We want to be technologically strong society. That's what we really. But a bigger advantage out of that would be, in my view, that the ethics in society, values in society, would be at a much higher level if the society moves somewhat higher than plain, simple, transactional dialogue. See, today, we do a lot of transactions, don't worry about ethics, and then in the evening go to a temple and maybe put some dakshina in the box. Say we washed out all our sins. According to me, compared to that, if I say that my 24 hours of work has contributed something to the value, even if it is economic value, I don't want to go to the temple. I may go to the temple for a different purpose, but no transaction with God. That look, I have done such and such thing, I am putting such dakshana, please forgive me. No such transaction. And that is what we do. So I think I will stop here, but the point is, I think if you want to convert India into a technologically strong society, which we must, I think we must make a significant shift in the way we conduct technical education. Because technical education is the route to make a country technologically strong. And for me, it is such an important thing that, in fact, even as a country, if you ask me what should be the priority number one, I would say this should be product. Thank you. I'll be happy to answer.
The floor is open for questions. Prashant will hand over the mic.
Thank you, sir, for that enlightening lecture. My question is, the problem is known. Now, as you rightly said, the yardsticks. Now, my personal belief is that the engineering community is sort of undermining its own existence because the yardsticks are such that the engineers community wants to prove themselves as scientists. In a sense that all the yardsticks are such placed that if they brand themselves as scientists, they move ahead in their career better than if they spend their time in translational research. So we are very fortunate that somebody who can tweak the policy, who knows exactly the policy framework in India is here with us. So do you think actions are being taken? I mean, you have the the Swarna Jayanti to Bhatnagar landscape for the academic world to chase. We are not chasing any translational. There is nothing to chase for translational research. There is no framework which is available for that yardstick to be firmly rooted in the academic world, so that there is a parallel stream of engineers who are proud to call themselves as engineers rather than want to camouflage themselves as scientists.
Well, let me attempt an answer. It won't be 100% satisfactory for you, but let me attempt. Well, first is when I became director BARC, in BARC there has been a history of against this debate, scientists versus engineers. And there used to be public debates at times. And so even before I became director, I had gone through this process of recorrecting our value system. And I think it has stabilized. Probably it has gone a bit on the other side, in the sense, probably engineers dominate more than being a scientist. So that's another part. But I'm talking about the situation in those days. So in fact, in my first kind of town hall meeting in BARC, I actually announced that I am a nut-bolt engineer and I feel proud about it. This was the first. Secondly, many times in terms of efforts, Dr. A.S. Rao, who was leading electronics activity in BARC, and then later on he founded Electronics Corporation of India Limited. He is on record to say, this is restricted to electronics, that the effort that is required to create an instrument to demonstrate proof of concept, and the effort that is required to take that proof of concept to a commercially robust product is 20 times larger. How he got that number 20, I don't know. But I think the point is very right, that the translational effort at times, it will vary from area to area, but it at times is much, much larger compared to the original proof of concept. Now remember, that doesn't take away the importance of people at conceptual level. So that nobody should ask them a question that, well, we have done such wonderful research, what is the outcome in terms of money? I think that's a foolish question to ask. But recognize that that effort in translation is actually much larger. And so I have made my own efforts to kind of convey to the bosses that the resources that we mobilize in encouraging this actually are not consistent with this need. That's the point you are making. Now, but things have changed to some extent. For example, if you take BIRAC, many of you, today BIRAC is I think a force to reckon in terms of their support, funding and all. And that focus is more on translation. And so I'm very happy that Department of Biotechnology has taken that lead. We had, say, Technology Development Board, which is also pushing that, and it's growing. In between, I don't know how DST would look at it, but in between there were actually difficulties in terms of, but they are streamlined those issues. But I agree with you that still enough has not been done. I think much more needs to be done. So that's why in my list on cultural correction, I have put policymakers also as part of that discourse. But I think your point is right.
Hello. Sir, I'm Dr. Andreas from Andhra Pradesh. Regarding the point you have told, him to solve the problem. I'm happy to inform you, sir. The bar team and myself, we have worked together to solve the problem, two problems. First problem is city sludge. Ahmedabad Municipality Corporation having the problem of city sludge. And Dr. Varshney from your organization, sir, he has the radiation technology, very good technology. But after radiation, the sludge which is coming out was of inferior use as a fertilizer in the farm. So NPK value was less. So he came to me in, I think, 2014 and we worked together. And now we have solved the problem of city sludge of Ahmedabad Municipality Corporation. Now we are targeting Indore also. The first plant has already come up in Ahmedabad. Next will be in Indore. And in this, the farmers are the beneficiaries. The society is benefited because every day about 500 tons sludge is coming out from the city. It can be goes as an organic manure fortified with the NPK by ourselves. So it's a very good example I would like to bring to the house with the help of ERC we did it in Gujarat. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Well, I'm aware of that. Let me also tell you a little history. You also have a sludge hydrogenation plant at Baroda, which was set up, I don't know, 30-40 years ago. Now, it was based on initial laboratory trials, then it was figured out that you can hygienize sludge. The plant ran for some days, but then the question was same, there was no motivation to move forward. And after a period of time they found that the moment you finish irradiation, you actually bring down the microbe count, but then afterwards there is a regrowth. And it was so kind of abandoned because nobody was wanting to move that forward. Although at one stage that plant was capable of handling almost 1/3 of the Baroda city sewage sludge, the plant at Gajravari. Now, so this was, I know, a lot of papers were written, even International Atomic Energy Agency, they were very happy that such a technology has been demonstrated, but there was a problem. So, in fact, very similar to what you said. Again, people got together and actually addressed that problem. And once that problem was addressed, the local farmers, this was supposed to be a research, although it is industrial scale, a research place. So it was working 9 to 5. People would go open the lab, run the plant, carry out some data collection, 5 o'clock, close the shop and go home. And the farmers were using that on trial. They found it very useful. Well, farmers can know, why are you shutting it down? They said, no, we don't have manpower. Our manpower is restricted. Farmers said, you train us, we will run the plant. So the farmers were trained. And believe me, that plant, farmers started running it round the clock. So it was a partnership of a very different kind. Came about through research motivation. And they formed a small company and started distributing that manure. And that success led to this, technology push and technology pull. So that created technology pull. And then it went to Ahmedabad experiment, that which he said. The short point is, if you restrict yourself to your own within the four walls or silo, things will not move. You can show that I have demonstrated this, but it won't move forward. If you have networked institutions, number one, you have much larger capability of problem solving. And you can actually, in fact, this capability of this country is so large, there is no problem which this country cannot solve. No technological problem this country cannot solve. That is, I am 100% confident. It's only that we don't interact amongst ourselves enough. And if you do that, this problem will be solved. So, I'm actually fully aware of that.
Good morning, sir. Thank you for piloting the technology vision 2035. I was one of the authors for road transport sector. But after we authored the road transport sector and in fact transport sector as a whole, I see a huge policy shift in the policies of Government of India. Suddenly you see the advent of electrical vehicles, and it is being proclaimed that by 2030 we should have 30% electrification of the road transport sector. We will go for 100% electrification for Indian Railways, and ground realities are being ignored that this country does not have even 5 grams of cobalt and lithium. It has to be imported. And there are many other issues which are very, very important. So, what is your take on this? Is it the right approach, or I think we are going over?
You have touched a wrong one. So pardon me if I appear bitter in between. But the fact is, I think you are right, these things are happening, but there are many other sectors these things are happening. First of all, let me amplify what you said. Today the situation is, see, electric vehicle is an important thing, and particularly in a country where, as I mentioned about hydrocarbon shortage, petrol, diesel having to be sourced on raw material, or have to be produced on raw material sourced from abroad. If we give emphasis on electric mobility, I think our dependence on hydrocarbon import will come down. So it's an important thing. I think that's the first point that we must recognize. But suddenly shifting the pendulum on the other side, and to say that the electric vehicles will occupy so much of share, that at times subsequent to no more other production of vehicles other than electric vehicles. Now the first impact was the petroleum sector. They also have to plan for their future strategies, investment in new refineries, new exploration activities. So they all got concerned. Should we invest or should we not invest? So it took quite some time to convince them that, look, in spite of all that, the ground reality is it will only be a gradual process. This will happen. There will be larger penetration of electric vehicles. But that doesn't mean that you slash down your plans on petroleum sector. In fact, even on coal, it will be foolhardy that because there is so much of renewable, so you cut down on coal. This country cannot afford that. So that part is right. But to take the larger point, I think it's important that see the way things happen, the scenario develops on the basis of market forces. Ultimately, people will buy what is most cost effective, and so that activity will be encouraged. So you will see larger penetration of that activity in the market. This is what happens everywhere. Now, as far as government is concerned, government has to also worry about future. If you just go by market forces, you may in fact end up in a very distorted situation where, so far if you are talking about energy, you may get energy security issues. If you are talking about transport, you may get transport security issues, and so on and so forth. In a sense, you may get into a kind of untenable future. And so the policy activity of the government is extremely important. Now these policy activities should be actually knowledge informed. And these activities should be that you want you are looking forward to a such and such future from the national interest perspective. Left to market forces, those also projection scenario can be left to market forces, it will go in a particular way. So you should now talk about a policy interface which will steer from what would have happened without any policy intervention to what should be happening internationally. And in so doing, it is not a switch. It doesn't flip from one place to another. It's a gradual transition. And depending on how you sort of bring new policies in place, you will have different scenarios. And so you must build these scenarios and make this policy correction so that your emphasis remains in the right place, but it doesn't distort other things. Now, that is what is not happening in our. And I think you cannot blame politicians for that, because they don't have that information. And some of it is our own making. For example, if, let's say I am working in, I won't tell you atomic energy because then it will appear biased. But let us say I am working in electric mobility in the context of it. If some important heavyweight policymaker I am interfacing, I tell them that look, this I am going to take this and the country's face will be transformed. And supposing it's coming from a very credible voice and the politicians trust you, they will take that action. So now the question is, I will ask myself, who is this person? So I think, you see, this is where, when we talk about, there are enough groups in this country who say that they are working in policy research. How much of this kind of work they do, I don't know. But I think this is what should be happening. Just as there has to be an interface between research and academia and technology industry, there must be also an interface between research and academia and the policy makers. And you see many of these activities which are happening internationally, what good quality reports come out. And many of our own people contribute to that. So I think we need more such inputs to come. And so the policy making should be more knowledge informed than it is today. Today it is knowledge informed but blinkered knowledge informed. We need more. That's how it is.
Sir, this technology education at tertiary level gets input from secondary and primary. Should we not focus on primary and secondary also to align it and develop a culture? Primarily because you said that it is translating into a cultural crisis. Technology education primarily needs to change its culture. So culture may catch them young is what I think would do much better to change the culture. कोलगेट सर पहली क्लास में छोटा छोटा पैकेट दे देता है ताकि कोलगेट लोग टूथपेस्ट जीवन भर करें. So should we not bring in creativity, innovation and all these things at younger level, which is by design getting isolated from the whole educational system. And by the time they come into college, particularly in technology education, कोचिंग के लोड के कारण उनको क्लास का महत्व ही खत्म होता जा रहा है. तो उसको रिवर्स करने का, और जैसा कि अभी प्रोफेसर ने कहा कि साइंस बेस्ड आप 11th 12th में आप केवीपीवाई कर रहे हैं और केवीपीवाई सेलेक्टेड बच्चा अगर जेई क्वालिफाई कर गया तो यू डोंट अवॉर्ड हिम. इफ ही डजंट डू जेई देन ही हैज टू गेट दैट. तो कहीं ना कहीं टिल्ट एक एंटी टेक्नोलॉजी जो मैसेज जा रहा है लोगों को वो है. और इफ यू वांट केवीपीवाई, व्हाई नॉट केवीपीवाई और other kinds of encouragement, and why rob them if they are KVPY, even if they are entering into IIT or technology, why should they not be given? Sir.
Well, thank you for that question, and that brings me to the slide which I skipped. Broader structural framework, and look at the elements there. universally accessible, ICT-enabled school science education in vernacular. In fact, in the technology vision exercise, if you look at education report, which has been released and is available on, there we have made a bold statement that the education as we see it today, the classroom, the teachers and all that will become irrelevant. And maybe it may be still pursued, but it will have zero value as we move forward. So we need to understand that. Nurture a culture of innovation and entrepreneurship at school level. Science innovation activity centers in every district to start with. This is for school children. Link relevant skill training with every higher education program. And higher education, I'm not talking about just science or engineering education. My often example I give is if I'm doing MA history, I should be at least be able to do the job of a tourist guide. If I cannot do even that, then what is the value? So that linkage is very important. MSME internship for addressing actual industry. And these are some of the things which initiatives are in place slowly. So the point is, this is absolutely right. This has to begin right from the school and run up to that. And I actually divide, just like we call primary, secondary, tertiary education. I divide education in education that kind of brings you up to date with existing knowledge and enables you to push knowledge envelope forward. This is one domain. Second is that which familiarizes you with procedural knowledge, and I apply procedures in doing. That brings me to professional education, engineering, medicine, architecture, and so on. The third, the skill part, what I know I should be able to do with my own hands, or what I need. See, even if I had to do an experiment, and so I often give example of Professor Govind Swarup. Many of you might have heard his name. He created a radio telescope in Utti and then a GMRT in Narayana. GMRT is essentially to look at very distant objects in, I think, meter wave frequency. Now, that was created, it was a completely new concept, state of art, and it's again several decades old. Even today there is a stream of astronomers from all over the world who come there to use that facility. So that facility has not become obsolete. Why this could happen? Because Professor Govind Swarup was both an astronomer and an engineer together. Same way Baba was. Baba was an engineer and a physicist, both of very high caliber. So I think this has to begin at the point. We cannot kind of put people in silos. You are an engineer, you are this thing, or abhi aap KV vijay ban gaye, so you have to become scientist. Nothing of that. So that this tendency to put people in silos is fundamentally flawed. So I agree with you.
Time for one last question. One more after.
So myself, Dr. Aslam from NIT Trichy. So two things that you talked about, the masters quadrant. Science know where to, we have to move the other three quadrants. And you also talked about the need for, necessity for confidence building measures between academia and industry. In reality, these two are silos. Very few academicians are there in industry and very few industry people are there in academia. So there is a need for at least a small flux to be happening between these two. So how do we go about doing that?
Well, since you're from NIT, Trichy, yeah. So just as I had an occasion to do a report on IITs, I also participated in doing a report for NITs. So if you read that report, I think this subject is dealt with in great length. But stated simply, there we have very strongly recommended a few things. Number one, every course, particularly where you can see industry involvement, you make sure that maybe 25% or 30% of that course delivery, you actually get faculty from industry, rather than trying to do yourself, the applied part, industry part. Get a faculty from industry. And of course, there you must apply all your checks. Faculty has to have certain attributes in terms of qualifications, so but see to it that you get that faculty from the industry. And not just giving a lecture and going away, but regular role. They should also contribute to evaluation. Secondly, get every faculty to spend some time in industry. You do several sabbaticals, include this also.